other folks. So I'd like to start, please, by asking the board members to introduce themselves. We will, to my right, at least on my screen, is Tammy. So Tammy, could you start by introducing yourself, and then other board members can take it from there, please.
Tammy Soul from Pownell.
Dick
Cindy
Grant,
Brown.
Woodford.
Cindy Brownell from Pownell.
Chayla Sikora, Bennington.
Chris, you're
I'm
muted.
muted. Yes, I am. Thank you. So that gave Jeff some time to get on, I think. So Jeff, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Yep.
So that's Jeff Leake from Shaftesbury. Superintendent Culkeen, would you please ask one of your staff to start introducing themselves?
Yeah, we have Assistant Superintendent Laura Boudreau here, Shaftesbury Principal Jeff Johnson, Monument Principal Donna Colley, SVSU Director of Finance and Operation Renee Gordon, Woodford Principal Sandy Foster, Bennington Elementary Principal Edie Dunn, Molly Stark Principal Donna Basic, and Pownell Principal Todd Phillips. And it looks like we have Interim Director of Student Support Services Kate Abbott and Facilities Director Jerry Prue.
Looks like we have Susan Hogue from Woodford also joining the call.
And I just let Scott in.
Okay, very good. So I'd open the floor for public comments, but I don't actually see any members of the public on the call. So if there are no public comments, the next agenda item are the minutes for the December 21st, which I have actually not seen posted yet. Can any of the board members confirm that they were posted?
Move to approve.
Okay, and I take it they were posted, so we have a motion to approve.
Yes.
Second.
Very good. Any discussion on approving the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
That's Scott, was that a vote in opposition?
No.
Okay. So that Scott's vote is in the affirmative. There are no votes for the opposition. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. And with that, we will turn the floor over to Director Gordon.
Good evening, everybody. Did somebody make me a co-host so I can share my screen?
I already made
yes.
you co-host. Your
Okay.
co-host and Laura is the host.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will try to share my screen. Hopefully this is going to appear on your screens larger than it is on mine. So I have split screen like we did before the first pass. And so we have the budget at the top with the narrative at the bottom. And I emailed this out earlier this afternoon, actually, I shouldn't even say earlier this afternoon. It was just a short time ago. And I've already added something to it. So I will make sure that we get a revised draft 2 posted to the website, and I'll point out the change that I made as we go through. Just a couple of housekeeping items that I wanted to mention before I start through. Also included in what had been emailed and has been posted to the website as well is the list of projects that was requested at the last meeting. So by building, we have some that had been identified over the years that haven't quite been accomplished yet. So those were included in the list, as well as those that have been asked for this year. Some we're still kind of trying to figure out how much they're going to cost. So there were just some there with placeholders that don't necessarily have costs associated with them, but things that have been identified that would need to be addressed in the future. Along with that, there was a question as to the behaviorist positions, and we actually have 3 of those existing. There is one at Bunnell, one at Pownell, and one in Shaftesbury. So just to kind of keep that in the back of your head as we go through, because there are a number of them being requested for FY22. So I haven't made a lot of changes to draft 2. Notably, the biggest thing is going to be the assessments have been updated. The SVSU board did vote on Tuesday to accept their draft 2 budget. So we have adjusted those figures in this draft 2 budget for the SVUESD. And just a couple of things to mention on that budget. There was an increase of about $55,000, which was less than a 0.2% increase. The budget does include costs that are coming in from Battenkill Valley. And there were a number of position reductions in that budget, notably 5 special education paraprofessional positions and 3 special education teaching positions and a part-time or a 0.5 FTE teaching position for English language learning, or those students that have English as their second language. So those reductions, and of course, everything is posted up on the website if anybody's interested to go back and take a look at the ins and outs and that budget. What is still in the budget is a position that has been identified as a possible reduction for the SVUESD as kind of an offset. So if I kind of jump in here and on the category side, I've noted, as I have in years past, any changes that I've made from draft 1 are identified in blue italics on the narratives. So this item right here, so the behavior specialist that's being requested at Molly Stark and a possible offset in the SVSU budget of a paraprofessional, I did not remove that from the SVSU budget yet. I wasn't sure if the board was going to accept all of these requested positions. So until this board makes their decision, if we're going to move forward, then we can go back to the SVSU and pull that position out. So it'd be about a $25,000 reduction, which would be coming directly off the assessments that we have in the for our local, quote unquote, local paraprofessionals. Another thing to note on the narrative is I've tried to identify approximate costs for each of these position requests. So the associate principal to be shared between Shaftesbury and Pownell is about $128,000. The behavior specialists / social workers and clinicians are each coming in at about $86,000, which is a salary in the low 50s, and of course, full benefits associated with those positions. So no other changes, just, trying to identify what those associated costs are.
Can I ask a question, Renee?
Sure.
The assistant principals at Shaftesbury and Pownell are not connected to what we're doing because of remote learning, right? This is something that's going to be ongoing.
Right. This was a position that actually has been talked about for, I believe, a number of years. And we actually had it in our first pass for this current year. But we had too many factors working against us for FY21. So it was one of the reductions we made for this current year. So we're trying again. Yes, and the other item that I changed on this draft 2 is we got notification from the treasurer's office that there is a change to a healthcare assessment that started a few years ago from the Vermont State Teacher Retirement System. So every new teacher that joins us, and even some of the teachers that we currently have, If they did not become a member of the Vermont State Teacher Retirement System prior to July 1st of 2015, the employer has to pay annually an assessment of $1,340 for each teacher. So this is a way that the teacher retirement system is trying to sustain itself. Not that there's an impact to this board, but another assessment that they have instituted along with this assessment is on our grants. So any positions that are grant funded, we actually have a 19.28% fee. So right off the bat, we're taking 19.28% off of our grant funds and moving that into teacher retirement for those folks that are in positions that are funded through federal grants. So that adjustment has been made in this draft. And then the other item I changed after talking with the auditors was for the truck. So instead of trying to purchase that outright next year, we're looking at financing it over 4 years. So that's, reduced the $60,000 hit to, it'll be annual payments of, I've estimated $16,750. So those are essentially the changes. I wanted to also mention, let's take a look at the assessments here. So assessments are line number 10. Overall, it's a reduction of comparing to this current year's budget. There has been discussion by the North Bennington Graded School District Prudential Committee Chair. He's requested that the assessment for early education, special education, and pre-K be re-examined. Presently, it has been assessed on an average, like a 2-year average of our average daily membership, which are numbers that are used to generate our equalized pupil figures. It's the way that it has been calculated for a number of years, so I've just continued with that same methodology. The case is that North Bennington perhaps is overpaying for the number of students that they actually have. So I have not made any adjustments to that yet, but I just wanted to make the board aware that should this board and North Bennington and the SU all agree to make that change, your assessment for special education in early ed and the pre-K will end up increasing.
Great.
Renee, what is
Yes.
that process? What does that process look like for reassessing the assessment amount? What goes into making that?
That's an excellent question, because you know what? I haven't had to deal with that yet. So I might ask some other folks that may have had to deal with this in the past. I'm not sure, either administrators or some of the board members I know have had longer tenure as well. So I don't know if this has been something that's come up in the past.
Oh,
No.
And if we need to table this, we certainly can, but I'd be just interested to know more about that process, please.
Yeah, so I mean, he's raised it, and it was noted at the SU board the other evening, and I was actually in re-looking at the numbers. I believe I had misrepresented the change. I thought it was going to end up costing North Bennington more if we shifted the way that he wanted to, but I went back to the data we had received from the state, and I had some of the numbers didn't carry over correctly. So in correcting that, it certainly would reduce what North Bennington would be paying, and therefore would increase what SVUESD would be paying. So essentially, it's something that each board kind of has to look at and agree to.
Is there an idea of how much, Renee, we're talking?
Well, there are so many variables. depending upon how we wanted to address it. So we were thinking that an average would still be appropriate, but if that were not the case and we were to look at exact actual per pupil counts, that could cause, serious fluctuations from year to year. If we were doing it based on actual number, we can do it based on average. Presently, the way that it's calculated, we take the head count or the ADM, the average daily membership, and the early education, special education students and the pre-K students are averaged at a 0.46 factor. And that's coming from statute. That's a portion of how the equalized pupils are calculated. And then along with that, it's been averaging grades K through 3. I'm not sure why. Perhaps it was creating more stability, so we weren't seeing huge fluctuations from year to year. But if we were to pull out the averaging of grades K through 3, and solely look at just pre-K and the early education, special education, there's definitely going to be swings. So there's multiple ways that we can look at it. But I definitely think that they're certainly looking to reduce what they're paying. They feel like they're overpaying for the number of students that are being serviced through that program. Okay.
Chris, is this an opportunity to ask a couple of questions, or should we hold off?
Well, Director Gordon, as long as we wouldn't be interrupting your flow, I would like us to be able to ask questions as these.
Absolutely. Anytime is fine.
Yeah, I guess the question I want to ask is, clearly the spirit of the board that we have formed before us today is collaboration as a region. And we are an SU, we are a region. While nobody wants to do anything that would cause one district to pay more than their fair due, certainly I am in that group. I would not like to see us get hung up on, one entity paying a little bit more simply because they feel that they're paying a little bit more. Well, we're all building education and education systems in a region and making this region through our education more desirable to be a part of. And I guess the spirit of this makes me feel as though that's not felt across the district. And how do we work through that as a team? And there may not be an answer, and that's okay.
Could I throw something into the ring here? Ray Molyneux has been contacting me routinely about some of these things, and while I'm not taking any position on this, I just want to say that he feels that the formula used, if that's the right word, over the past several years has not favored North Bennington, and he thinks at some point there needs to be a standard they can rely on. Again, I'm not taking a side because I don't understand it all, but that's where the origin of the concern is anyway.
Do we have a copy of the formula that's currently being used?
I don't have anything. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Jeff, what was your question?
Do we have a copy of the formula that North Bennington's being used right now to assess everything? Like, how do we know how they're being assessed?
Yes, it's on our assessment worksheet. It's not something that I typically publish because it literally is a working document. So it's not, polished for, public consumption. But I can tell you it averages roughly 9%. So when we're talking about special education for our early childhood students, along with the pre-K costs, North Bennington's paying on average probably 9%, and the SVUESD is picking up the balance. And I mean, the way that I ran the numbers, it was a difference of, tenths of a percent. So it's not a huge swing, but it definitely would be, several $1,000s more to the SVUESD.
And Director Gordon, are you anticipating this is something that's going to come to bear this budget season, or is this down the road?
Ray has been asking about it, and he actually jumped in at the right time this year. So it's something that the boards can actually discuss before it's kind of too late. But I wanted to bring it to your attention. I don't know if he's going to formalize a document and submit it to this board for consideration, or if he's going to continue to flow through the SU. But I just wanted to make this board aware that I have not made any changes based on that request. I've continued to just use the methodology that has been used in the past. And if there's an agreement to change it, then there would be an impact.
Any further questions about the issue regarding North Bennington's assessment? All right.
All right, now, can I have a quick question? Renee, how is the, with the new COVID stimulus package, the CARES Act that was just passed in December, how's that going to impact our number in Vermont? So if I read it correctly, it looks like we might gain 4 times more than what we got in the springtime. I mean, how much is being allotted to each state out of that $54.3 million for education? Do we know yet?
We have not received any information from the agency yet. So typically they have to work through the Agency of Administration, and then it goes to the Agency of Education. And once they digest it all, then they send it down to us here out in the field, as they refer to us.
Okay.
The field. So we do have all of the building principals here this evening. I know that there were a number of questions when we looked at this budget the first time around, particularly with regard to the position requests. So I don't know if any of the board members have questions that they would like to revisit now, so the administrators can address those items.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is to do with the assistant principal, and I just can't understand why this year, when it's during the COVID, why do we need an assistant principal, even though it's shared? I can't wrap myself around that. Again, I'm thinking of Pownell's increase in taxes for the last 2 years, and I'm hoping it doesn't do that to us again this year.
Yeah, yeah, Cindy, I can talk a little bit about that. It's not needed currently during this COVID time. We had talked about this 2 years ago, and we finally got it in the budget last year, but knowing that we were going through, hard times with COVID and everything else at that point, they pulled it from the budget from last year. So Jeff and I wanted it to be submitted for consideration for next school year, and hopefully we'll be back 5 days a week full time. That's our hope, of course, but it wouldn't be anything current for the remaining part of this school year. Jeff, if you wanted to add anything as well.
No, I agree. It's something we've been talking about for a couple of years, realizing we probably don't need a full-time one in each school, but sharing one would be more efficient for the district, just with some of the needs that we've been seeing in the school, administrative wise. And he's right, it's something we need right now while we're in between remote and doing a hybrid model. But next year, if we are back to full time, that's, I think Todd and I were thinking that's what we're hoping for, and then we could use that resource.
Yeah, my only thought is that we went down to one secretary, which to me, our school has always been in need of 2 secretaries. And we're talking about an assistant principal. My personal feeling is I just think we need that other secretary when school gets back to normal versus a assistant principal. Just my thoughts.
Yeah.
And how do you see this principal being split between the two schools? Just so, would it be half day in Pownell, half day in Shasberry?
That's
So-
one model that we could look at, but I don't think the traveling between schools every day is beneficial. I think if the principal was assigned maybe a Monday, Tuesday, one school, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for the other school, and then the following week, 3 days and 2 days. I don't think the traveling between buildings on a particular day is beneficial for a staff member. The work that we would be having them do would be, during a full day rather than splitting that position every day. And Jeff, again, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the other thing we talked about, Todd, is when, it'd be nice to have that person when one of us is out of the building and having
Right.
a licensed administrator running the building rather than right now I have teachers that volunteer to be the administrator. And I just feel more comfortable having a licensed administrator in the building when I'm not there and being able to have that flexibility. And I know Todd and I work well together. We can plan that ahead of time if one of us is going to be out, asking that assistant to be there.
And there is a cost for having a person step into that role of administrator if somebody's out. Is that right or no?
No, that is not right. There's nothing in the contract to give them any funds for that. They just volunteer.
So there's still teaching. Like I have a teacher that would act if in need. So that teacher is still teaching during the day. And if they're needed and I'm out of the building for a meeting or an appointment or something like that, they have to get coverage for their classroom, and we would have to pull a paraprofessional or somebody to cover that classroom, so that classroom teacher could take over the duty of the need at that point. So it's all volunteer, but it's part of what they're doing that day. We would have to pull them from the classroom, which we don't like doing. We want the classroom teacher in there as much as possible.
Well, Todd, this is nothing against you, but since 1987, I started in the school system. We've never had an assistant principal there. Never. So, just saying.
Yeah, I know that, Cindy, and I appreciate that. And I know it's nothing against me.
No.
We're taking
Definitely.
a look at the additional responsibilities and the things that we've had over the years. Things have changed since, this is my 35th year in education. And of course, things have changed over the years, and we have a lot of responsibility. So I do respect that, Cindy. And, it's a consideration that Jeff and I wanted to ask the board.
If it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen again so we can see the list of the positions that were being requested. So if there are other questions, we can direct them to the appropriate administrators. So in addition to the associate principal to be shared between Shaftesbury and Pownell, there's a behavior specialist at Molly, social worker or clinician to be shared between Benell and Molly, a social worker or clinician for Pownell, increases to art for Molly, Monument, and Benell, an increase to the part-time custodial staff to a full-time, the assistant in Shaftesbury. So I think those are the asks. So if there are questions.
Well, if there are no questions, I will at least offer a comment. I think in all of the schools over the years, certainly that I've been involved with the board, we have recognized that in terms of academic achievement, there are areas of our schools that are lacking. And I think part of what we've all been able to identify over time is that the outside of school issues that our students are carrying with them into schools, the effects of trauma in their lives, the effect of poverty in their lives, the effect of drug abuse and opiate abuse in their lives, creates a student that has a greater challenge being ready to learn. And I think all of these positions that we've identified, the behaviorists and the social workers and the clinicians, are an essential piece of helping our students to be able to be more ready to learn, and then for us to see that level of academic achievement that we want to see in our schools. And I know, these are hefty price tags, I think, particularly given the other challenges we're going to face in this budget year. But I think these are important positions for us to protect. And I just hope very much that we can find a way to protect them within the budget, and then to advocate for these positions when it comes time for us to be interacting with our constituents and the members of the public and advocating for this budget. So I just wanted to put that out there as my 2 cents on the issue.
I think if I can add to that, I have, it's been nice to see that where reductions can happen responsibly, they have also happened. And so we're looking at something where there's an increase in some areas, but we are also seeing decreases in other areas, and that to me is responsible. And the folks that have dug deep and made things happen in that regard, thank you. And I echo Chris's comments 100%.
Any other questions for Director Gordon or any of our principals?
I wanted to scroll down so you can see where we are bottom line wise. So we're at a $24.4 million budget, which is almost a $900,000 increase over the current year's budget, or an increase of about 3.8%. Along with that, you've heard me say over the years that we always have to actually look at what the impact is on our demand for funds coming from the education fund. So on the revenue sheet that was included in this draft, the general state support grant, you can see that this is a significant decrease to what we're going to be asking for from the fund. And that is mainly because of the significant increase that we had to our fund balance because of when COVID struck in March. We really suspended spending. We weren't filling vacant positions. So that did leave us with a hefty fund balance that we're carrying forward. So that's helping to decrease the amount of money that we're going to be asking from the ed fund, I should say. But we know that the education fund is also facing significant deficits. So even though we're asking for less, it's still not going to be enough to really kind of level our anticipated tax rates. And if it's okay, I can just go ahead and jump into showing you what I have for the best data at this point in terms of estimated tax rate calculations. So we've only received one version of equalized pupils thus far, and it has been labeled as a working version. So I understand that they're going to be opening up the data collection again, I believe next week, for people to submit changes. I have my staff reviewing the ADM figures that were included in that working version of the equalized pupils. But again, at this point, it's the best information I have. So that is what I'm presenting to you here tonight. And our equalized pupils for the elementary district have dropped. It is down almost 38. So that is in one way helping because it has decreased our percentage of assessments owed by to the SU. So there's a corresponding increase on the Mount Anthony side. But when we look at drilling down into the tax rates, because we have fewer pupils, that is a higher cost for this budget per pupil. So We have 1324.15 is our equalized pupil figure currently for the SVUESD. So you can see I have the columns for Bennington, Pownell, Shaftesbury, and Woodford. And this is the current version of the MAU budget, but the MAU board won't be meeting again until next week. So it differs a little bit from their draft one because I went in and adjusted their SVSU assessments. So it's actually a higher budget than what that board has seen to date. So when we look at the budgeted expenditures and our offsetting revenues, we come up with education spending. We have to divide that by our equalized pupil. And then that is offset, or I guess compared to the property yield recommendation from the tax commissioner, which came out December 1st. And the tax commissioner had to consider, the ed fund deficit. So this is a pretty big reduction from what the property yield was last year. And that is where the news came from, that schools are going to be looking at a 9-cent tax increase. It's based on this number. Traditionally, over the past few years, we've found that the tax commissioner tends to be a bit conservative. And once the legislature actually votes on this, it has increased. So of course, if that number goes up, our tax rates will go down. But at this point, that is what we're looking at. So we then have to look at what our homestead tax rate is, and then we have to blend them based on our equalized pupil percentages between the two districts. And in doing that, you can see this is the row here, what the tax rates would be for Bennington, Pownell, Shaftesbury, and Woodford. And I apologize that I don't have, the headers aren't staying with me because there's just too much data above there. Then we actually have to factor in the common level of appraisal, which came out just maybe 2 weeks ago. So I've updated that information here. And I also have a summary, which is the last page of the packet, but just so you're all aware what this is looking like. So Bennington's CLA has slightly increased, so that will be helping the tax rate for Bennington. North Bennington is a decrease. Pownell is a pretty good jump, so that's going to help offset any increases. Shaftesbury is seeing a pretty high reduction in their CLA and a reduction for Woodford as well. So once we apply the CLA to the homestead tax rates, we come down to what the estimated tax rates would be. And if I actually just pause for a second, what this CLA is showing us is the appraisal of our homes in our communities. So if each of our homes were appraised at the level that they felt the market would sustain, it should be 100%. But in Bennington, the properties are undervalued. So you can see the CLA is below 100, and the properties in the other three townships are slightly overvalued. So therefore, the grand list is higher, and the tax rate can then come down a bit to offset because the properties are assessed or appraised at a slightly higher level. So comparatively to this current year's tax rate, based on the information that we have, so the budget that you have in front of you now, and Mount Anthony's at the point it is now, which I can't say whether that's going to stay the same, increase or decrease at this point. Bennington's looking at a 2.5-cent increase, Pownell at about a penny decrease, Shaftesbury, unfortunately, due to the significant change in the CLA, is almost a 7-cent increase. And then Woodford is about a 2.25-cent increase. So that just gives you a little perspective as to the budget that you have before you, what the possible tax rate impacts could be. And this is probably like page 8, 9, 10-ish in the draft 2 packet. It's all in there. Sorry, I know it's a lot to digest. I'm happy to go back through and explain things a little bit more, or if there's other questions, I'm happy to do whatever the board would like. Sure.
I have one. What is the bottom line? Have you gotten to the bottom line yet?
What do you like in terms of this budget?
No, the bottom line percentage is the overall. What is the overall increase?
I typically don't do it by a percentage. Like we just kind of compare it, on a dollar factor. So I'll pull that back up again. I mean, I could certainly.
Or is it too soon to tell? Because I know last year Pownell went almost 10% increase. And that's what I'm trying to find out. What is our increase going to be?
Well, as things stand right now, if nothing changed and this board accepted the budget that you have before you, Pownell should be seeing a penny decrease on their tax rate.
Okay, so instead of 10% increase, it's going to be 9?
No, you wouldn't have an increase. It would be a decrease.
Okay.
So the thing that's helping Pownell is the increase in your CLA is helping to offset that ed fund deficit. So if we were to, level fund, everybody was thinking, oh, just coming out of the gates, everybody's going to be looking at a 9-cent increase. That's not the case for us because of the offsetting fund balance that we have. That's really causing us to not have to ask for as much money from the ed fund as we typically would when we have a fund balance that isn't quite as hefty as it is this year.
So I just want to, just verbalize it and acknowledge that, a 7-cent increase for our partners in Shaftesbury is difficult. That's a lot. And I don't have anything more profound to add right now, and certainly nothing in way of a solution, but just want to acknowledge that that's a lot. That's a lot for any, just like Pownell had an increase last year that was difficult to, for many members of that community to manage. I'm presuming a 7-cent increase in Shaftesbury is going to be difficult for a lot of community members to manage. So that's a piece I think that we still need to be working around. I don't know that we can necessarily call this yet at this point.
I wouldn't.
Well, we haven't yet dealt with the facilities project either.
Right. So I did go ahead and add back to the draft 1 budget what we were typically contributing to the reserve funds. So that's $130,000 that wouldn't necessarily have to remain in the budget. With the fund balance that we have, we certainly don't want to see that disappear all in one year. We would like to have that decrease over time, because if we didn't have that offsetting revenue, it would be a significant increase on the ed fund, our demand on the ed fund. So what Mount Anthony opted to do, I think 2 years ago now, they put a ballot article on the warning asking the voters if they would allow the board to have authority to essentially evaluate what they have for a fund balance annually and try to start working that down. And what that board did 2 years ago, last year, because the fund balance was, again, pretty significant as it has been for Mount Anthony. They opted to take $150,000 out of the fund balance and put that in a reserve fund. So right now we have a fund balance of I've only estimated it here at, 2.3 million. Instead of budgeting to have $130,000 go, into that reserve fund, we could look next year or the year after to perhaps pull money from that fund balance if we were to craft a ballot article the same way. So we could pull that money out of the budget this year and perhaps look to put it into a reserve fund through different means in the future. We wouldn't want to do both this year, because if we pull it from the expenditures and then also pull it from the revenue, it's the same thing. We're just taking it out of one place and it's going to bump up the other.
Renee, do you know offhand the timeline we would need to abide by to get such a question on the ballot this year?
It would have to be on the warning that that the board signs. So that warning has to be posted between January 21st and January 31st. So it would just be a ballot article along with those seats that are up for re-election for the board members, along with the budget. And I don't know if there's other, there's some articles that we normally vote from the floor, but so yeah, I mean, we certainly have time to do it now.
Yeah, okay.
And it's something that we wouldn't be able to do it this year anyway. We'd have to have that voter approval, and then we could do it the following year if it was approved. So I think I'm hearing that this this budget's not palatable. So I'm going to need some direction as to what you either want as a target, or if there are things that you folks can think of right off the bat that we should look at removing to try to bring those estimated tax rates into something that's a little bit more at an acceptable level.
Well, so a question for the board members: what do we think the palatable tax increase would be? And again, specifically thinking of Shaftesbury in this particular year, a 7-cent increase is a lot. So what would be more easily passed?
That's a difficult question for me to wrap my head around. If I wanted to cut the increase to half of the 3.8%, what does that mean to Shaftesbury, and what does that end up being? I don't know. Is that a ignorant question?
No, well, no, and it could very well be, Dick, that the question I asked was the opposite way of going at it. And maybe instead of trying to figure out what the target is, it's taking a look at the line items and see what can be reduced or eliminated from the line items. But again, Scott, go ahead.
From my perspective, and I think we should always think of things from, is there something that's frivolous and can be removed? Certainly, those are easy decisions. Are we funding education for 2022 that is a reality of what education is like in 2022 is also another question. And many people don't understand what education truly is today. It's nourishment for kids, it's counseling, it's all of the things, Chris, that you mentioned earlier that cost money. And it's not just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and reading. And it's terrible that it costs them. Well, it costs the money that it does because it's worth it. It's worth it for our region. I think we're incredibly fortunate in Shaftesbury. I don't know. I haven't been here a long, long time. I don't know when the last time a budget was voted down, but it seems to me the voters of Shaftesbury in the past have been willing to stand behind education and feel it's important. And that's certainly what I've heard in the last several years of being on the board. And if I had to explain this budget the way it's written just now, I feel like I could explain it as being necessary for what we're all dealing with today. And to that end, I feel like I could stand behind it as I see it right now.
Well, thank you for that, Scott. So I'm going to then put Jeff Leake and Principal Jeff Johnson on the spot and ask for Jeff and Jeff, what are your thoughts about what Scott just said?
I mean, I would agree with Scott. I think Shaftesbury's always stood behind the schools and education. You know, my concern is if you look at the votes over the last couple of years, those yes and no votes do get closer and closer. You know, and that's a trend that's been occurring as we have an aging population in the community. You know, we see less kids in the school with an aging population. You know, it's hard to justify, you know, increase in cost. I mean, I think most people in Shaftesbury do it because, you know, they do, you know, value education. My concern is, like I said, those yes and no votes keep getting closer and closer, and that margin is getting smaller. And the last thing you want to do is really have a budget that fails, because then we're back at this in March. So that's what I
Jeff.
Yeah.
Principal Johnson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going in my finishing up my 8th year here, and the community's been super supportive every budget season, no matter what we put in front of them. You know, I'm going to echo Scott. You know, it is a much different world than it was even when I started 8 years ago. And the kids are different, and there's different needs that we really need to address. And I echo Scott. I would absolutely be willing to support this budget as it is as well with the community.
Okay, well, thank you both for that. So with that in mind, a question for the other board members. Given what we've just heard from the representatives from Shaftesbury and from Principal Johnson, are we comfortable as a board giving the thumbs up to this proposed budget?
I mean, for me, I am knowing that when these, I know how hard Renee and her team work to ensure that the line items in here are the things that are really what's needed, and how hard the principals work when they come together and discuss all the different things that they need for their schools, knowing that nobody's asking for something that they don't truly feel is a necessity in their school. Mm-hmm. So knowing that and just having this experience over the last few years that we've had with going through this process, I'm comfortable because I know that due diligence has already been done.
Great.
Chris, if I may, just really running numbers on the fly here, just to give you a real quick idea. If taking Dick's suggestion, if we were to try to cut that increase in half, so our increase is roughly $900,000. So if we were to shave $450,000 out of this budget, you would be looking, Bennington right now as it stands, it would be about a penny. Pownell down about 2.5 cents. Shaftesbury would still be over a 5-cent increase. Mm-hmm. And then Woodford at about a penny increase as well. So again, that would be trying to identify $450,000, which, I mean, there are a lot of ads and there are probably, you know, places that we can cut, but it's, you know, when we really want to make significant reductions that way, it ends up being staff, because that is the bulk of where these budgets come from.
Well, and that was helpful for me to see, Renee, because even with such a drastic cut, a 50% cut to the increase, Shaftesbury would still be looking at a significant enough tax increase. So that was helpful for me to see, and you know, not to say that pardon me, that another 2 cents it's not nothing, but that's good for me to see. Thank you for that. So any other board members want to, Dick, I've seen your hand up a couple times. Go ahead, please.
Are we happy with all the facilities issues, or am I jumping ahead of where I should be?
Well,
because I guess I'm looking at places where you can cut some money there, and given my career, I am the last person who wants to cut out maintenance in buildings, but there are places where at least in Woodford, I think we can reconsider some of the things and some of the numbers. For example, a parking lot. I don't know that you've heard anything from our select board. The boys don't want to move on who owns, well, they don't want to move on granting the property, and that's a fairly large chunk of money. If you talk about $61,000 there, that shouldn't be in there.
If I may, yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify that what is on that projects list is not all in this budget. That is a kind of a comprehensive list of things that we've been accumulating over the years. I don't have a list in front of me, but I can tell you it's significantly less than what is on that list. So if you guys want to, I can try to pull things together as you continue to.
Well, Renee, do you know offhand?
Oh, sorry, Chris.
So I want to follow up on your question, Dick. So Renee, do you know offhand whether or not the paving project that Dick has identified, is that budgeted?
It is not. It is not.
But there are other things listed there for Woodford that, maybe $40,000 worth that we could take a look at to be resolved by other means. I know we have insurance and the rest of that, but as a contractor, I can do some of that under my own insurance. Not that that's the best idea, just that that's an option to pull some figures out. And I just wondered if there's other ways to do that for some of these other projects. I don't want to nickel and dime. I just think there's going to be questions about those things.
I have $20,000 in for Woodford, basically kind of a repair and maintenance to try to start chipping away at the items that are on that list. So $20,000 towards that project list is what I have in for Woodford.
So in terms of, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And I was just looking to see it, and $20,000 towards it's $130,000 collectively towards that capital reserve fund.
So what would this board say to us requesting that Assistant Superintendent Boudreau pull together the facilities managers of the different schools to take a look at the projects that are slated, the projects that are budgeted for in this particular budget, and to see what can be shaved off? Do we think that's a reasonable next step? And then question for you, Assistant Superintendent Boudreau, how much time do you think that would take? And then Director Gordon, how much time would you then need to reconfigure a proposed budget given those potential cuts?
So can I just restate your request? So Chris,
Please.
your request is for us to internally pull the facilities managers together to review that list of projects to see what's absolutely necessary, and or do something similar that we're doing right now, where we could speak to different projects to make good decisions. So we could do that. And Renee, that sounds doable.
Yeah, I can tell you that they have not asked for a lot. So Shaftesbury, we have in paving. We have in some bathroom work, $7,000, LED lighting for $5,000, some flooring for $4,000. The big one was the exterior door replacements. That's about $40,000. So that's all totaling about $82,000 in the budget that you have before you. Pownell, we just have a flat amount of $50,000 to, again, try to chip away at, projects that are needed. Bennington might be a little bit more difficult for me to identify on the fly here because it's divvied up between multiple locations. But I would say that the work that you're asking may not result in a terribly significant amount of money that's going to yield anywhere near, enough that would move that needle.
Okay. All right. Scott, I see your hand, please.
I was just, if I may, I wanted to just offer, we know that you never save money by neglecting deferred maintenance. All this stuff has been in this. We've we've kicked the can down the road. At some point, we just have to pick it up. Is this the right year to do it? You know, I don't know. But I have felt like I've been hearing the same things for the last several years. At some point, we just have to do it.
Mm-hmm. So given this conversation,
and actually,
yeah, please.
We've been hearing from, Jerry and from principals prior to us having this board all together. We've been hearing that this is stuff that's been needed for several years in a row now. And, that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's not that I'm yearning to spend this money right now. It's just, we continue to hear it year after year after year.
Well, so with that in mind, go ahead, Tammy, please.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I agree with Scott on that I just think we have been, pushing some of these projects out, and it doesn't sound like from what Renee is saying that it's going to save us a significant amount of money. I mean, I think we could revisit that if it was, indeed going to save us the amount of money that Shasberry may need to offset some of those costs, but I just don't see that happening. So I do agree with Scott on that.
So between the three Bennington campuses, it's about $180,000. So we're kind of across the board pretty level in what the facilities managers are asking for, and it's repairing flooring or putting new flooring in, taking up old carpeting, things of those lines.
Any other questions or comments about the proposed facilities upgrades and work? So I'm wondering if that means that this board is satisfied with the current draft of the budget and if we want to move to approve it.
I'll make a motion. We approve the budget as we have seen it this evening.
Great.
I second it.
And that's a second from Chayla. Any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Make sure those hands are nice and high, please, so I can see them. Thank you very much. Okay. Any opposed?
Yes.
Any abstain? Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Any abstentions? Okay. So with that, the motion passes. So, Director Gordon, could you please remind us what our next steps are as a board?
Yes. So I will work on getting the warning prepared. We will need to have all the board members sign that at some point. I did reach out to our clerk today to see if DocuSign was acceptable. She said at this point in time, it's not, but the legislature could change that any moment. The central office is open daily, so I don't know how the board feels about everybody coming in to sign. Or if we should, pursuing legislative action would probably take us way too long. So I just, whatever we need to do to get that signed, what the board's pleasure would be. Cassie offered to have people go to the Bennington town office. She said you can just go to the side door and she would give it to you to sign, or we can have it at the central office once it's ready. And people can just come in right there at the entrance and I can leave it at the front desk.
We go to the market anyway, so central office sounds like a simple solution.
Okay, very good. Does the board wish to include a ballot article for trying to work down the fund balance and asking the public for the authority to be able to review that on an annual basis and have it be the board's discretion as to what that money is used for?
So, and I believe that would need to be an official piece of action from this board tonight for us to include that. So I would open the floor if anyone wants to make such a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Very good, Cindy. Thank you. Is there a second to that, please?
Second.
Very good, Dick. So any further discussion about the motion that Director Gordon had, or the ballot item that Director Gordon had outlined for us a bit ago? Okay. So hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hands and saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. So that motion passes. So Director Gordon, you'll draft that language that will be with the budget warning.
Yes, I'll pull it up from Mount Anthony's language, and of course, we'll have legal counsel review it.
Mhm.
And I can certainly send that out once we have it in a form for the board to review. And with legal's approval, we'll have it ready for signature, and I'll let everybody know.
Excellent. So the next agenda item is to set future dates, which we do not need to do because this particular bit of work is done. I just want to say again, just express our thanks to both Director Gordon and also to the building principals and to the different facilities managers. This is no small feat at all. And to be able to aggregate all this information in a way that is understandable for the rest of us who don't do this for a living is tremendously helpful. So just thank you so much for all your work in making this an
Ditto.
easier process.
Yes, thank you for your work. And
Yes, thank
thanks
you very
for being
much.
here. Thanks for being here tonight, all of you.
Let me just glance quickly at the agenda, but I think that is it for tonight. It certainly is. So there's other, but we don't have any other. So I would just note that if it didn't go out today, it'll go out tomorrow. The warning and agenda for this board's regular meeting, which is going to fall next week, I think. So keep your eyes open for that. And with that,
Chris, can you just say that again? It cut out on me, and I want to make sure that everybody.
Yeah, so either today, if it didn't go out today, it will likely go out tomorrow from Amy, the warning and agenda for this board's regularly scheduled board meeting, which I think is next week. I think it's, but the agenda will say that. So keep your eyes on your email for that, please. And if there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you,
Second.
Dick. Thank you, Cindy. Any discussion on adjourning? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. The motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a safe evening.
Thank you.